The Algerian regime published in its official journal of July 24, 2024 the Executive Decree and Decree 24-243 establishing a national list and setting out the procedures for managing that list. Having enacted in June 2021, Article 87 bis of the Criminal Code allowing to qualify as terrorism any act of political opposition, after having suffered 3 massive rejections by the Kabyle people of the 2019 Algerian presidential elections, the 2020 constitutional review and the 2021 legislative elections, sanctioned by 3 massive zero votes. After planning apocalyptic arson in Kabylie in August 2021, which caused the burning of nearly 400 Kabyles and the destruction of hundreds of thousands of hectares of vegetation and orchards and decimated livestock and wildlife. After having sentenced to death in November 2022, on empty files, 54 Kabyles in a mock Stalinist-style trial. After having imprisoned hundreds of Kabyle citizens for expressing their opinion on the abuses of the Algerian regime. After having prohibited tens of thousands of people from leaving the national territory without any valid reason. After having closed all literary cafes and prohibited any cultural or commemorative events not initiated and controlled by the regime. The Algerian regime, based on the criminal Article 87 bis of the Penal Code, and in application of the provisions of this article, establishes a black list of its opponents, called the National List, which will contain terrorist persons and entities. Recall that this Article 87 bis has been denounced by many political figures at the international level, the U.S. State Department, the European Commission of Human Rights, the UN Rapporteurs on Human Rights organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and others. The list is managed by a commission chaired by the Minister of the Interior and does not include any magistrate or civil society representative. The decisions of this commission are expeditious and without appeal, they are implemented within 24 hours. The state of emergency is almost established and for an indefinite period. Is entered on the list, any person against whom a judgment or conviction has been made for having committed or attempted to commit one of the acts referred to in Article 87 bis. There is already enough to fill the list with the hundreds of prisoners of opinion and the thousands of people subject to the ban on leaving the national territory. It is subtly referred to Resolution 1373 of the United Nations Security Council, which sets out criteria for inclusion on the list in order to give a little credit to this maneuver. The objective of this maneuver by the Algerian regime is neither more nor less than the seizure or freezing of funds and property held by listed persons, groups or entities, assets of any kind, whether tangible or intangible, movable or immovable. A long list ranging from wood and coal to ships and aircraft. The most tragic thing is that the overwhelming majority of detainees are ordinary citizens living in very modest circumstances. Adding misfortune to misfortune has been a constant feature of the Algerian regime since 1962. The revanchist spirit of this list is clearly assumed in its Article 35, which states that the person or entity on the list is prohibited from any activity of any kind. The double penalty, in addition to the seizure, we do not have the right to work and too bad for children. The dilettantism of the said commission is already announced and promises errors to people with a common name, thus Article 29 warns that, if it appears that, there is a concordance or real similarity of names, titles or designations, the committee shall order the immediate lifting of the freezing and/or seizure of the applicant's funds. The Commission relies on the spirit of collaboration or the defamation of the administration, in its article, of Patanist inspiration, which states, any administration holding information on the funds of listed persons and entities shall be subject to the verification obligation provided for in Article 38 of this decree, allowing immediate implementation of seizure and/or freezing measures. This famous list is reminiscent of a very sad law of the era of French colonization, the law of July 26, 1873 called the Warnier Law. After the 1871 Kabylie uprising, a seizure was implemented, both on individual property and collective property of the Kabyle tribes under the principle of collective responsibility, affecting nearly 600,000 hectares. In the event of inability to pay a buyback, French colonization applied expropriation. The purpose of this law was a real legal plunder of the lands of the indigenous Kabyles in order to create European settlement centers. Does the Algerian regime aim to replace the population in Kabylie so as not to suffer from a zero-vote Kabyle? He should ask himself the question, what remains of the Warnier Law? HRDK, Human Rights Defense Kabylie condemns in the strongest terms the intensification of the Algerian regime's fascist practices based on the plundering and instrumentalization of the judicial system through, inter alia, Article 87 bis of the Penal Code. HRDK calls for the immediate repeal of this devious article and denounces the climate of general terror and the state of siege that the Algerian colonial regime has established in Kabylie, mass arrests, the torture inflicted on many detainees and his maneuvers to cut off the Kabyle people from their diaspora. Human Rights Defense Kabylie stands with the Kabyle people who are advancing surely and unavoidably towards their independence through its major achievements such as the proclamation of the State of Kabylie on April 20, 2024 in front of the UN headquarters in New York.